and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. This is our January 2024 community chat where we invite members of the Caribbean tech community to join us in discussing ICT-related topics or issues that they're interested in, thus allowing them to share their own unique perspectives, their knowledge as well. Joining me today are no strangers to the podcast. We have Esmeralda Levens, who is an associate director of BearingPoint Caribbean, which is based in Curaçao, and specializes in the digitalization of governments and other online portals and other technology solutions that make public services better, faster, and smarter. And we also have Garfield Gordon, who has joined us on several occasions, especially as part of our Expert Insights series on cyber threats and security. Garfield has over 30 years of diverse IT experience, including people management, sales, software development, field engineering, enterprise architecture, data warehousing, and vendor management in the Caribbean, Canada, the United States, and Central and South America. Esmeralda, Garfield, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so before we get into the topics, I wanted to just ask, I mean, it might be a little bit out of left field, but, what is one thing that you're hoping to do better this year? Esmeralda, let's start with you and then Garfield.
All right, so what I would like to do in 2024 is have better time management so that I have actually more time to spend on reading up and listening to podcasts, because it's all going so fast. It looks like it's in an exponentially fast, and I feel like I'm not keeping up, and as well as I would like. So I need to delegate more so that I have more time to do these things.
Okay. So similar to I'd like to spend some time keeping up to date with the trends, because technology is moving very quickly. The refresh cycles around products and life cycle of products, it's shortened significantly. So, I have to keep abreast of it. I'd like to improve on my time management as well as to complete some certifications and get them out of the way. So that's my 2024, roadmap.
Okay, well, that's great. All ambitious, but it's so true in terms of just keeping abreast of things, because it really takes time to learn about the new developments and the implications, and even just time to sit and think. So sometimes it's not even the reading so much, but just understanding how these new developments affect you, what could be the implications, and that sort of considerations.
Yep.
All right, so let's just get to the community chat, which is the meat of the matter. And we'll be discussing three issues, three topics. The first is e-commerce and the Caribbean retail sector. The second, resilience of our internet infrastructure. And the final one will be the Caribbean brain drain in the remote work era. That was a little bit of a tongue twister there. But let's start again with e-commerce and the Caribbean retail sector. And I think just my observations, I don't think we really have any true facts and figures, at least Caribbean-wide. But we can see, though, that we're increasingly undertaking transactions and payments online. Online shopping has become, between the Caribbean countries and North America in particular, has increased dramatically in the past few years. And in Jamaica, for example, there are plans to increase the duty-free threshold for imported goods at the port from $50 to $100. So that means that if you import goods under $100, you can they will be duty-free. And I think even these days, Amazon can be shipped directly to Jamaica. So before it used to be maybe like books and maybe some CDs, but a lot of stuff you could not ship directly from Amazon into the Caribbean, for example. And now that seems to be changing. So it may be signaling, though, that the retail sector dynamic in the region is going to be changing as well, and perhaps undermining our local sectors even more. Esmeralda, let's hear your thoughts first, and then Garfield.
Yes. So you mentioned Amazon that they're delivering directly, but they're only delivering to countries where they can actually adhere to their return policy. So they have very good return policy, as you know. And from some countries, it is very difficult and very expensive to send back products. So, for example, you ordered something, it arrived broken, or maybe the wrong color. Mistakes are made. So not all islands have Amazon Direct Delivery yet. And instead of that, then you can use a package forwarding service. Those are typically in Miami. So you open an account with them, you get a Miami address, you order all your things online, you specify that address that you were given, and then all your products that you ordered are sent to the address. And the nice thing is with Amazon, you get one package at a time. But with these package forwarding services, they can actually open your packages for you, send things back that are not good, and they can also combine them into one parcel and forward it to you. So I contacted one of the package forwarding services, and that's very popular in the Caribbean. I won't mention their name, but they told me they had 131,000 packages last year, and they see a growth every year of about 8%. So you're right, Michelle. It is becoming more popular, and the top products are, they told me, car parts by far number one, clothing and shoes for both men and women number two, but also things like hair extensions and sport articles are also on the list. And the only thing is they saw the growth stunt a little bit after COVID when the oil prices went up, and DHL and FedEx and these other transportation services, they raised their fuel charges by anywhere from 30 to 40%. So it's becoming very expensive. So they see the growth that, they saw stunt a little bit. And now they're offering in some of the islands, I noticed some other modes of transportation like sea freight. It takes a little longer for you to get your package, but it is a lot cheaper. And I mean a lot. I went online and I ordered something, and then I thought, let me try sea freight. And it really was half of the price. So that really makes a huge difference. So the other thing I noticed was we have in the Caribbean about, I would say, like 44.5 million people, and only about 20%, so 1 in 5 have credit cards. But more and more people are getting credit cards, and also Visa and MasterCard now have the debit card versions of the credit card. You have a Visa debit that you can also use to order online. So as more and more people start to have credit cards, I think we're also going to see an increase in e-commerce. Yeah, I personally, I prefer still going into a store and trying on the things myself, seeing it, touching it. But my kids, for example, they order everything online. So yeah, there might also be a generational difference there. I don't think the regular commerce will go out of business or will be impacted too negatively, because I still think tourists would like to shop, walk around. The people who don't have credit cards would still like to shop. It's just that it might be a little bit more expensive compared to ordering it online and getting it, depending on the mode of transportation you choose. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with many of your points, Esmeralda. And, just to point out that, like, for the consumers that don't have credit cards, some of these package forwarding facilities and virtual malls, they will actually take the cash, purchase the item, and ship it locally. So, there is another revenue stream for them, and, building that customer base. Aside from Amazon and eBay, like, a lot of people here in Jamaica buy stuff on Shein. So a lot of clothing, as you mentioned, right? All the fashion stuff. I myself, there are certain brands that I will purchase that I know my waist and my inseam, and I know that item will fit. So I'll purchase it online. I don't have to worry. Whereas if I go with a different brand, then, it would be best to go into a store and try it on, and especially, the Euro fit versus the American fit, right? So we have those challenges. You had mentioned about like Amazon distribution. So yes, for products that that they want to facilitate return logistics, they have those direct purchase points for those for certain countries. But I've been an Amazon member since 1998. Of course, I started with books. Then I started purchasing commodities, and getting the item was not difficult, as long as the shipper would provide shipping to the location. So like last year, I purchased a part in Germany and it was shipped. It took 7 weeks from the time placing the order for me to receive it in hand. But while I was tracking it, I saw where it was at the distribution center. Then it moved to the shipping entity in 3 days. It stayed there for 3 weeks. So I assumed that time was maybe like the transit time on the ship. It got to Jamaica. It was stuck in customs for more than a week, and then it was released and I got it. So, 7 weeks turnaround time. Now, when I'm in the US with Amazon Prime, I can get my items same day or next day. So that experience, once you become exposed to a certain type of experience, you always want that experience. So I'm frustrated for an item taking 7 weeks. I'll wait a week. That's But yeah, pretty much you're on point with all the items you mentioned with the growth trajectory. My kids, they buy stuff online. But I guess right now they're consuming more they want to play games like Roblox and so on. So a lot of the things that they're purchasing are more services as opposed to product. They'll say, "Oh, Daddy, when you go away, just get this for me or get this one." So that's sort of the transition. And actually, interestingly, so one of the things I do as a hobby is to restore old computers, like Commodore computers, old Apple computers, and so on. And of course, sometimes I can't get the parts. So now there's a 3D printing service that I can order the part and they will ship it to me. Sometimes I buy the parts on Amazon as well. So we can get anything we want.
That is cool.
Okay, so, but then, I don't disagree with much of what you all have said. The only thing, though, Esmeralda, is I wonder about the impact on the local, retail sector, because oftentimes they're making whatever profit they make, or even just their viability is on margins. It's you buy they purchase whatever product they're going to sell after they pay for shipping and customs and so on. Is a little markup that is going to cover all of their costs. And thus because of that, then then becomes a question of volumes. Am I selling enough to make the thing viable? And if we are buying so much online, what does that do to whether or not our retail businesses can remain viable? And I guess that then now becomes the question that I think we may need to ask, and therefore how the dynamic is changing.
Yeah, but I think shopping also has a social aspect to it, which, online you don't get that. So just walking around downtown, going from shop to shop, being around other people, nothing beats that. So you see that even though I was in Europe this summer, a few years ago when I was there, I saw a lot of shops closed. I see them now, reopening. And the streets are full again with people, especially after COVID, when people were required to stay inside. After COVID, people are really wanting to be outside and meeting up with other people. And again, in the Caribbean, only 1 in 5 persons has a credit card. So there's plenty of people who will not buy online, who will still buy in the retail shops. So what I noticed too, in Europe at least, when I was there, people will they'll go to the store to try on things, but then they'll order it online, or they will, go to the store to return things. And then, yeah. So I think they'll both live side by side. Also, I think, like I was saying, the top products, car parts, clothing, hair extensions, there's so many other products that people, for some reason, don't really buy a lot of online. So perhaps if somebody would like to start a retail store, they would have to do it in one of those other products. What do you think, Garfield?
I agree. But part of it is also preference, right? So culturally, we have preferences for certain products. So like here in Jamaica, we get a lot of products from LATAM. So I'm familiar with my quote unquote Kellogg's cornflakes. I like that brand. But then the Latin American version to it doesn't always taste that great. So, we have some challenges for certain branded products. To to your point, you made the point about people still not having credit cards and so on, so they go to a retail store. And to the with respect to COVID, a lot of companies actually created an e-commerce website during that period. So now even the local stores are offering an electronic storefront, so you can now purchase the certain items. But culturally, the Caribbean our people are touch and feel people. We need to see we feel the quality, we see what's going on there, and then yes, we might purchase online or we purchase from the store. So there's still some opportunity for the retailers to sell. My only one is in terms of like car parts. So like my car, when I purchase parts locally, the markup is 300% compared to what I buy for in Miami. So in that case, I buy the part in Miami. I get it shipped, right? But for clothes, I find clothes prices comparable, especially when you go to a brand or a retailer that has multiple stores. So they'll purchase in bulk, so they can leverage, the wholesale prices. So when I compare the cost of an item at a particular store compared to what it would cost me in the US, my personal variance is a 5% differential. So as long as it's within that 5%, I purchase it locally. If it's greater than that, then I look at, what the total cost of shipping and everything is going to be for me to bring that item here. But that,
So you don't think that e-commerce and the emergence of more and more online shopping will have a significant negative impact on the local retail stores?
It's more about marketing. I mean, just like with any business, right? If you're operating a traditional brick and mortar, you have to look at your consumer base. You have to look at churn. You have to look at what your customers want. You have to do marketing. You have to get them, get your product in front of them. Using electronic platform, it becomes a little bit easier for the platform or for the retailer to, showcase certain items. With the advent of certain data privacy acts coming in, that's something that we also have to look at, because like here in Jamaica, the Jamaica Data Protection Act has a requirement for consent. So for me to email you, to send information to you, you needed to provide me with consent for me to be able to do that. But on the flip side, if I'm giving you a splash page, like a front door when you come to my website, then you have inherently opted to come to my website so I can display anything to you. I'm not sending you information. So now I can say, oh, you have this deal going on jeans, or this deal going on whatever. So those are some of the things that we can use to circumvent some of the regulations that are coming in and, for draw people to your website. So it's always about, right now, we're not going to really discuss it, but let's look at AI. Let's look at ads. Whenever we search for something on Google, next time you go to our webpage, you're seeing all these items showing up about the thing that you search for or you're discussing or whatever, right? So it's sort of the same thing, right? So AI is bringing that in. So the more that you go to a retailer's website, the more it will identify a pattern. What is it that you're looking for? And we can look at things on the metrics of like time of day. So in the morning, you're looking for, I don't know, dresses, right? In the afternoon, when it gets cold, you look for blankets, right? So it starts to say, oh, all right, so I can detect a pattern going on here, and then it starts to show you blankets in the afternoon, special deals, and it rotates it every 5 minutes, right? So I don't think it's going away. It's about our ability to interact with it that will change our perception and the sort of connection that we have with our customers.
Yeah, but then Garfield, it speaks to, again, now we increasingly, it's almost as if we now just have a global retail market. We are no longer just, the retailers in Jamaica. You have the Jamaican retailers, those that are located here with their storefronts here, but they also have the online retailers. So it's almost as if the dynamic in that respect there is no barrier, there is no sort of veil between your local storefronts and the online ones, and that's then now maybe about how local retailers need to up their game to ensure that they at least get in front of their consumers better, and even just adjust their business model, because it may not necessarily be on the volumes that they used to rely on before, but they can't necessarily jack up the price too much because, like you with your 5% variance, you will order online instead. So, we really have, I think, well, not necessarily just emerging, it has been there for some time, but I think it's becoming a little bit more pronounced in the sense that we now, probably even more so than ever, are beginning to see that we need to operate in a global marketplace.
That's correct. I mean, globalization came about with the rise of the internet back in the mid-90s. There are some players that took advantage of that and they became quote unquote world leaders. We have others that they still continue to do business the way they did it 40 years ago. And so we have that challenge. But today, the marketplace is becoming more competitive. People are, becoming more aware of choices, right? So, let's say I'm just choosing a brand. Let's say that there's a Sephora store here and I go to that store. I may not have all the options as if I would go to Sephora in Miami or Sephora in Canada, right? So they're all different because, when I go to, let's say, a Sephora store in Miami, I'm making that distinction between Miami and Fort Lauderdale, because when you look at the products and let's say you look at makeup, you notice a difference in terms of the product that's there, the shading, the color of the products from one location to another, right? So, we look at all those options. But here, like in Jamaica, we don't really have many options. Like for me, doing the hobbies thing, I need electronic parts. I can't get them locally. When I go to a store and I ask for, a special type of capacitor, they don't have it. So I have to now order it online. So that's Amazon or eBay. Or I have to fly to Miami and go to an electronics store and get the parts there, right? So it's about choice. It's about options. It's about competition, right? And there are certain products that we will always purchase locally. Let's say for hard dough bread, National hard dough bread, I'm going to go walk into the supermarket and I'm going to purchase it. It's a local brand as opposed to something else that may come from another party. But then there's this Hawaiian sweetbread that only, a few stores buy it. I like it because it's sweet. I'm attracted to sweet taste in food. So I want that one. So it just depends. There's some things that you will go to a physical brick and mortar store for. There are things that you'll order online. There's also the cultural aspect that I mentioned before. We really love to go and touch and feel the products. But, people are also doing research on Google or going on SD or Shein and doing the comparative study. They're looking, what does it cost on Shein versus what it costs in the store? When they work it out, if it's similar, they'll go into the store and buy it. But if there's a significant difference, order online.
Yeah, if I may add two things to what you just said, Garfield, and also you, Michelle. Here in Curaçao, what I noticed in the malls, they're really focusing now on the social aspect. So, for example, they have one day a week that is senior day, and they invite seniors to come. Of course, the seniors come with their children and maybe grandchildren. They have some music in the food court, and that brings people to the mall. And so when people are there, they're going to shop. They have... besides stores, they also have places where kids could play. And I saw the same thing when I was in Colombia a few months ago. The malls there too have playrooms and places where you could have like batting practice for baseball and things like that. Because while the kids are playing, the parents, are also there. They're going shopping. So there's, I think what you mentioned earlier, Michelle, the brick and mortar stores really have to change the way they market and attract people to their stores. And then the second thing I wanted to add was that my youngest son, he just started his studies in college and he's studying retail management. And I noticed that what they really learn and what the focus is on how to get your brick and mortar store up and running and successful in, together with the online options that are there. So their approaches, they can complement each other instead of they don't necessarily have to compete with each other, but complement each other. So I think when we give the younger people who do studies like this a chance and hire them, this should help our regular commerce to coexist with e-commerce.
But beyond that, we need to expand to the real estate developers and property managers that they can increase in the price significantly, because as a retailer, how can I continue to pay the rent if I no longer can increase the price of my products in order to remain? You're
Good
increasing the rent on me and I'm not getting the volume sales. Then what do I do? Right? So, I mean, in the last 4 years, what you've found is that a lot of retailers, they've actually closed the physical brick and mortar store and gone online. So, it's like, we're caught in the middle of, being between the hard place, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. But folks, we have to leave that topic and move on to our second one, which is the resilience of our internet infrastructure. And I think, certainly for me, these days we can't afford for our internet to malfunction. I think a few weeks ago, I didn't have internet for maybe about 3 hours, and it was painful because I work primarily online, and just trying to keep in touch with clients and whatever arrangements that I've made for the day, etc. It was rough. So, but even a slow transmission speeds or interference can just be highly stressful. And a complete loss of service for an extended period of time can be traumatic, to say the least. As a result, addressing the resilience of our internet infrastructure is becoming critical. And it was something I even heard yesterday on a call that I was on, talking about the need for critical internet infrastructure laws, so critical resources, and really trying to shore that up. But Esmeralda, I think for you, in working with various clients, what are some of the concerns you have regarding internet resilience? And then, of course, Garfield, let's hear from you.
Yes. So one of my concerns is 2 years ago, I think it was, or maybe it was last year, early 2023, early 2022. I don't remember exactly. A cruise ship at Anguilla, actually, when they put they lowered their anchor, they hit the cable for internet to the island, and it broke. And the whole island was without internet for a number of days. And that's when I was working there. That's when I really realized, like you just realized yesterday with the 3 hours not being able to work, how dependent we've become on the internet, and that we really need to have plans in place for if there's an internet outage. So then I think it was a few days ago where I was watching a Gartner talk, and they talked about the sun. And that really sparked my interest, because from a distance, the sun may seem calm and steady, but if we zoom in, then we can see that it's actually in a perpetual state of flux. And so approximately every 11 years, the sun goes from a low point in solar activity, we call that a solar minimum, to a high point in solar activity called the solar maximum, and then back to a low point. So it fluctuates back and forth. And it has to do with the sun's magnetic field. So you have the North Pole and the South Pole, basically, of the sun, simplifying here, of course. And then this causes a field that acts sort of like a handbrake, and it prevents solar activity from increasing on the sun's surface. But then suddenly, and without warning, the brake is released, and then solar activity ramps up. And so what you get is sort of like on Earth, right? You have solar flares, which are sudden bursts of radiation from the sun's surface. But then just like on Earth, you also have ejections of plasma, massive plasma clouds, nothing like we have here on Earth. And they're hurled into space. And so if these the plasma ejections reach the Earth, it can really trigger a geomagnetic storm, which can cause power outages and things like that. This happened in 1989, if I'm not mistaken. There was a huge power outage in Canada, millions of people without electricity for weeks. But that was in 1989, when we were not as dependent upon the internet. And then in 2022, if February, I believe it was, SpaceX has the Starlink satellites, and 40 of them were burned up because of what the sun did, a geomagnetic storm that it caused. And so scientists are predicting that a new maximum, because we're in another cycle leading up to a maximum, that is going to be another maximum. They think it will be around mid 2025. And now they predict that not only will there be no electricity in some places of the earth, but likely also no internet. So then that got me thinking, are we prepared for that? Do we have some kind of internet outage plans in place? So for example, if we don't have internet for a few days, do we just close everything? Or are we going to use offline productivity tools? Do we train our employees on how to work in case of an internet outage? Because we're sort of used to electricity outages. We just use, I use my telephone, I use my for everything then if there's no electricity. But internet, I don't think we can cope with, but we have about a year and a half to prepare for this. So I believe there should be a strategy in place. Each company should have that. Each company that's dependent upon the internet heavily, they should identify alternative workflows and processes for the things that are very critical for the business processes that are very critical for them, and maybe have like training and awareness among the employees, so that not when they're subjected to this outage, then all of a sudden people are starting to think about it, but that they are prepared for it. I don't know, Garfield, what do you think of this? Is it a concern of you?
Well, I agree. And yes, it's a concern. I'll just tackle your last point first. So the challenge is the mindset that you're presenting died 30 years ago. Because, since the internet, like let's use hospitality as an example. There used to be a board in the reservations area, they call it the reservations board, that you would tape on the name of the guests and how long they were going to stay, right? So you would know exactly. And then so they would use that board as the primary and then use the computer system as secondary. Today, the computer system is primary, but there's no backup. There's no board, right?
Exactly.
So we have challenges, right? So, to bring back that mindset, because if you think about it, all the line staff, the associates and the managers, they're all young. They're not aware of these sort of processes. You'd have to bring back someone from retirement or hopefully you have someone there who has been in management for more than 30 years who could then teach them. Right? Because otherwise, that skill is gone, right? So, and there are many businesses that fall in that trap, right? So you don't have the resources to be able to teach someone how to do a manual process, right? I mean, kids today can't even calculate or add two numbers in their mind. If the calculator is gone, that's it. They're totally messed up, right? So we have those challenges. Now, to the resilience, so part of it, and as you outlined, we have to look at the minimum, maxima, and then the ejection itself. If it's a large enough solar flare, it will affect everything electronic. And so the traditional method of trying to prevent this or protect against it is to shut down all electronics during the period of the storm, right? So it means that your business would not be operating. You may not even have electricity going on for that period of time, right? Because even the transformers, they will get a surge of energy that would blow the transformer. So then, your power utility company has to come and replace it. So you'd still be out of power for a period of time. So, one of the strategies might be to just shut down everything for the period of the storm and then bring everything back up. For systems that can be self-contained, like they have their own generator and so on, then one of the workarounds is to build what is called a Faraday cage. And what it will is move the electricity around through the mesh, and it would not affect the components. But yet still, the things that we're dependent on, like our cell phones and computers and so on, those would need to be off during that period of time. So, it is what it is, right? We can't fight against physics.
Yeah, when my kids were still in school, my kids are grown up now, but when they were still in high school, they would have the regular, middle school, they would have the regular fire drills. And the alarm would sound, and they would have to go out of the classrooms, just have a drill. And really, I feel that we should have these regularly at various companies as well, that companies that are highly reliant upon the internet, conduct regular tests and simulations to ensure that whatever outage response plan they have in place, that it's still effective and that everybody is aware of it and knows what to do, instead of just closing business for a few days, because it costs a lot of money, right? Every day that you close, it costs a lot of money.
It does.
So,
and again, it comes back to the type of business, right? Because there are some businesses in their business continuity plan, they have a method of doing manual transactions, right? They can record the entries in a receipt book, et cetera, et cetera. There are other companies that are technology dependent. If the technology,
yes.
there's absolutely nothing that they can do. In the event of like a solar flare, of some scale, your DR policies become moot at that point, because you can't bring up back a system, because you turn on a system, the electromagnetic flux will damage it again. So you just have to wait. There's absolutely nothing else that you can do. The best course of action is to just wait. It normally takes about 3 days for that type of solar activity to dissipate. You're just out of it for 3 days. You treat it as a long weekend.
That's what I was thinking, and I'm glad you mentioned about the time, because that was a question I was going to ask Garfield, and I was wondering whether or not, thanks to COVID, where we had to shut down to varying degrees, that we realized that we could shut down our operations, be it for a few days, and yes, the world might be a different place, but it didn't completely collapse. So,
right.
I wonder whether or not, it may just mean that we just have to shut everything down and wait, because it's not necessarily that this calamitous solar flare is going to happen within an hour and finish. It's going to take some time for it to be considered, for it to occur, for the radiation levels to drop back down to what might be considered safer. And the thing, though, is that it may not necessarily just be an isolated incident. It may be a period, several different types of activities happening within a period. So I think we may just have to ultimately roll with the punches up to a point, but it does, still speak about business continuity and being prepared, which is, I think, what at least what I think is important.
I agree. And even now, there are lots of companies that don't have a BCP plan, a business continuity plan in place. They don't have a DR plan, disaster recovery. Luckily for us in the Caribbean, because we're affected by earthquakes and storms, there are a few places that have it, but there are many that do not, right? So it's easy to sort of replicate those type of plans from, a well-established entity. It could be the government, it could be, a large enterprise, or what we consider to be an enterprise in the Caribbean, and they could share that information, right? But it is something, and remember, it's the solar flare wouldn't be focused on just one region. It would literally be affecting almost every country. As the globe spins, some area on the globe would be affected by this electromagnetic flux. So, we just have to think of it as like a global shutdown for roughly, 3 days. It may be longer, but on average, solar flares will last about 3 days. Or
Garfield, you mentioned the business continuity plan and the disaster recovery plan. For the companies that do have it, are they solely focused on internet electricity outage, or are they also focusing on internet outage? Like, I know, for example, my company where we work, we definitely have an electricity outage plan. So we now have a generator, and all of that. But an internet
all right,
connectivity plan is different from that. Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the broader picture and look at like our cable system, our submarine cable system that provides internet in the region. Let's say like here in Jamaica, right now, that landing station is managed by Cable and Wireless Networks. So it's really, so no matter who your local ISP provider is, it will still go that one
go through there. Yeah.
So that's some of the challenges. Like in Curaçao, you have about 3 or 4 points of presence. So you have internet going everywhere, right? So for Curaçao, you have a different type of resiliency that's built in. So now to the meat of your question. So for companies that are reliant on the internet, they need to have different ISP connections. All right. So again, like in Curaçao, it's different. You can literally have 4 distinct, diverse internet paths leaving the island. Whereas in Jamaica, I mean, Digital Deep Blue is supposed to come here. I don't know if it's landed yet, but for right now, it's cable and wireless networks. So no matter who the ISP brand is, cable and wireless or Flow, Digicel, yada, 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 they all use that one landing station. Okay. So we don't have the same type of resiliency. But companies should have, if they're heavily reliant upon technology and the internet, they should have at least a minimum of 2 ISP connections. So like here in Jamaica, it would be namely Flow and Digicel. And then now you have some other entities like Island Networks that they can provide, wireless connectivity. Starlink, as you mentioned earlier, they are an option. If you want more fixed services, then you can do a VSAT system. And then if worst case, you can leverage Inmarsat or some of these other marine-based satellite systems. But the more that you scale, number one, it's the slower the technology is going to be in terms of internet speed and the more costly. So if you go to Inmarsat, it's a lot of money for a very low speed. You go to Starlink, it's comparable. On the best of days, you're getting like 200 megabits per second. And, that's more than what most people have as internet service today. And then you go to your local ISP. And then, if you're just looking at regular broadband, you have options. If you're looking at MPLS, then you have to, scrutinize things a bit differently. So it depends. Every organization, you have to look at how they use the technology, if they're dependent on it, or if it's just a commodity item. And then, what is the use? Is it like now you have a lot of entities, they have moved their services to the cloud. So, now if the landing station in Jamaica goes offline, then it's really just the customers in Jamaica that would be affected. Everybody else in the world, assuming there's no solar flares, everybody in the world would be able to use the services hosted in the cloud. And then when you get back online, you're okay. So again, it depends on the business, the type of systems that they have, the applications that they have, whether they have global load balancing type resiliency or everything is hosted locally. So we have to, dig into the meat of the matter a bit more when it comes on to each customer.
I'd like to ask you a question. You just mentioned that here in Curaçao, we have more points, not just one cable that leads the island. So if that cable for some reason breaks, we have other internet, what is the word, options? Yep. I don't know. Yeah. But we also have, the government started this, I guess you would call it a company called Bureau Telecommunications. And that is what they do, right? They are the ones who make sure that we have internet access. They think about these issues that we're talking about now. Do you know if other islands in the Caribbean have something similar that the government has set up? Or is this more something that the companies themselves, have to pick up, that somebody has to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to do this as part of my business model?
So there are many countries in the region that have a plan. The execution of the plan is at various stages. So that's part of the challenge. Some entities, the politicians say, well, this should be borne by the private sector. They should be responsible. Some people say, well, we have the USF, the Universal Service Fund. We can do it. There's some entities that say, well, do we just do like a point of presence? Or do we roll out a plant, a fiber plant across the island? So these are some of the considerations with varying levels. So like in the Bahamas, they want to be a technology innovation center. They want to be the place to be for the Caribbean. And so they're rolling out, infrastructure similar to what is described, to what you described. Jamaica is doing some stuff as well, but then, there's always this little bureaucracy going on. Who does what? How long should it take? What's the cost? Who's going to bear the cost? Then you have, you go along the Eastern Caribbean. There's some countries that have the vision, but they have no means to execute. right? So we have varying challenges depending on which country we're looking at and the types of business.
Yeah, because if internet is going to be the infrastructure on which we are going to grow our economies, which I think it is and should be, then we need to take this serious, right? We cannot be reliant upon one cable under on the floor of the ocean that gives us internet. So it's definitely something I feel that all the governments should definitely look into and take seriously.
No, I agree.
Michelle, what do you think?
I definitely agree. The only thing though is that we're kind of up to time, so we're going to have to leave it for now. But it's definitely a point, and I think especially in Curaçao, Esmeralda, because the internet exchange point that exists in Curaçao is so vibrant and it generates a lot of traffic. So I think there's a lot of awareness, by the government and regulators to ensure that the traffic that is coming to the island and to the internet exchange points, can leave freely and is not impinged in any way. So that may be also contributing to why Curaçao has developed and implemented the systems that it has. But as I said, folks, we have to plod along. And the last one, our last topic, the Caribbean brain drain in the remote work era. And I mean, brain drain, we have been hearing about it for at least 30 years and before, because it was, when our, relatives back in the day would be going to the UK for us in the English speaking Caribbean for a better life and so on. That was all part of it. So it has been a perennial issue in the Caribbean region, people leaving our shores for better opportunities elsewhere. But Garfield, as someone who has immigrated for work in the past, what are your thoughts and what impact, if any, do you think the remote work construct might be having on brain drain these days?
Okay. So, as you mentioned, I went overseas back in 1997. And, for me at the time, it was, I looked at the marketplace. I wanted to become a consultant. I looked at what the requirements were, and I noticed or observed that people who had international experience got paid better as consultants. So I went for that option. Now we're in the era of remote work. And so, it draws upon a factor that most people don't think about. So we have to look at it in terms of, am I employed to a specific company, only doing work for that company, or are my services going to be resold to that company's clients? So in the latter, as long as the services are going to be resold, many governments, their immigration policy says, if you're going to work for a third party, you require a work permit. So like in the US, you need to get a H-1B at a minimum. And similarly for Canada. There are companies now that you're only working for that company. You'll never do anything for any other third party. Then you can stay in your country of residence and work for that company, hopefully get paid in foreign currency, and you're okay, right? And it comes down to that, right? Because like when I look at the average salary scale for Jamaica, and I'll just quote the terms in US dollars. So for an IT professional, mid-level going to senior, the salary range is about 40,000 US in Jamaica. Now that same person going to, and I'll just use Miami, going to Miami would earn $100,000, right? The more senior that you go, just multiply it by or add like 20K, in terms of your ranking of seniority. So you can end up with like $180,000 in Miami. Now, that same role going to New York may pay you $300,000. And you say, wow, I'm getting $300,000. But then you're going to pay your federal taxes. New York says, hey, you got to pay me state taxes. By the way, Florida doesn't have state taxes. Then you live in New York City. New York City says, hey, I need my city tax. You're going to pay municipal taxes, right? Then everything there is expensive. You're looking at parking. Parking is like $30 an hour. You look at the parking garage, the facility is up to $800 a month, right? Then rent is $4,000 a month. So that $300,000 in New York means nothing at the end of the day, right? So it really, it varies. It varies based on where you go, where you live. Like I know people who are in, let's say, Atlanta, $120,000, and they have a mansion. So it just varies. It varies based on where you live. It varies based on what your needs are, what you're looking for. So for me, I was looking for that exposure because I know that it would add value to my life and then allow me to become a better consultant. So that is what I was looking for. But there are many people today that they're just looking for the money. And as you had mentioned, with remote work, it is possible to work for a company, get paid in some foreign currency, that you're okay. Anything to add, as Esmeralda?
Yeah, so this is also a point of discussion here in the Dutch Caribbean. And so I feel that we are trying to address both the brain drain as well as the brain gain. So when we look at brain drain, we're looking at what can we do to minimize the need to go, elsewhere for higher education. So one of the things we do now is, I'm especially interested in IT, of course. So we do offer now higher education in IT at the local university. So that will allow some students who are interested in IT that they can also do that here on the island. They don't necessarily have to leave. And the other thing is to promote brain gain is we also want to stimulate students when they make that choice of what they're going to study to choose something that aligns with the job opportunities in Curaçao. Don't choose something that we're not doing at all on the island. But so giving a lot of information sessions and guidance when students make their choice. So that's another thing that we do. And for the company that I work for, BearingPoint, we really would like for young students from Curaçao to come back to the island when they're done with their studies. But many of them want to stay abroad for a few more years to gain more work experience or to pay back their student loans. So what we've done a few years ago was actually start an office. We now actually have two abroad, so that students can first, work for us there abroad. And then after they've worked for us for a few years, and they're ready to come back to the island, then they come back. And that's proven to be very successful for us, trying to get young professionals back to work for us here. And the other thing is what I've seen that they did in Curaçao is if you want to study abroad, whether it's in Europe or in the United States, you can now get your student loan here on the island, so that the students are more likely to come back, because then they don't have to pay it back, in the States or in Europe, but they can pay it, work here and pay it back from here. So yeah. The brain drain is definitely one of my concerns, but I also feel that there's a lot of people who do end up coming. So in the last podcast where I was a guest, we talked about digital nomads, so we're trying to do things to attract people. So maybe we cannot get back everybody who leaves to go and study abroad, but if we can get back other people instead, that's better than nothing, I would say. That's also good. And if I look at Curaçao, we had a census in 2022, and the results were recently published. And about 20%, so every 10 to 11 years, we do a census. And compared to the last census, about 20% more people immigrated from Curaçao than, 11 years ago. And the immigration, so people coming into the country, that decreased by 30%. So yeah, it's a net negative flow of migrants, which is something that concerns us. I believe it's like 7% per year or something like that. That is negatively, the growth is in negative direction. And the brain drain has more repercussions, right? So it means if we don't have young professionals, it means less consumption of goods, closure of certain businesses, increase of empty houses. You do see that. You see in Curaçao some empty schools, empty buildings. There's a decreased demand for credit, and that, of course, has a negative impact on the health, the financial health of commercial banks. Just labor productivity, competitiveness, innovation. I'm big on innovation. So you really want young professionals to come back and settle in our islands. But then we have to also be wondering, why are they not coming back? Why are they staying? So one of the things is they want more flexibility. I have 3 grown kids. They're all abroad now studying, and I would like for them to come back. But my son, for example, he's working 4 days a week, which is very normal where he's living. And that's not the norm yet here, in the Caribbean. He has many more vacation days over there than he would here. So we have to be a little bit more flexible, I think, in our workforce when it comes to secondary, labor conditions that we offer. People would like to work from home. So my colleagues who work abroad, they go to the office twice a week and then they work from home the other days. But here on the island, that's not really accepted yet. Although I have to say, since COVID, it's become a little bit more acceptable or accepted than it was before. But yeah, the young people, if we want to keep them here or if we want to lure them back, we really have to think about changing the way we approach the workplace and the work conditions. It's not all about salary, although that is also a major part of it.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I align with some of your points. Like especially from the financial perspective. One of the challenges we have here in Jamaica is getting a loan. So whether it's a commercial loan from the bank or getting a venture capital loan or angel investor, those are very challenging. I could go to the US and even not be a citizen and get a loan from some of these entities to do a startup. All right. I tried, I did some investigation for doing a startup here, and the bank said, well, I need to bring in 3 years audited financial statements. It's a startup.
Yeah.
Right. And so those are some of the challenges that you face. So, even as a young professional, when you look at what your peers are going through, your friends or family, what they're going through, you look at where you're at, might as well stay. Like your son, he's in an environment where I'm pretty sure he gets 6 weeks vacation days. He works 4 days a week, right? There's like a welfare system that promotes for a lot that he's looking for. Why not stay? Right? So, I'm sorry.
But at the same time, Esmeralda, you said some things that were quite compelling to me, because if, for example, more people are immigrating, we don't necessarily have as many people coming into our countries, then you have, as you said, I mean, the whole productivity sector in terms of the labor force, it gets smaller. And therefore, you start to begin to understand, while probably we look at places like Japan and South Korea, that when they're talking about aging populations, but we are beginning to see what could be the start of that in our own countries, because our productivity segment or cohort is declining, because many of them are going overseas for better opportunities. And so what happens to I guess our population? You talked about housing, investments, a lot of those aspects of our communities that perhaps we don't always give thought to. I mean, we talk about brain drain in terms of skilled labor and the availability of people for the various jobs, but it also may mean, though, that even for us in the Caribbean, we may need to consider the extent to which we are attractive to others, because here it is at our productive population is immigrating, but for example, here in Jamaica, we're getting to a point, because the unemployment rate is getting quite low, and we have industries that are looking for labor. There have been some suggestions that we may need to import, skilled persons to fill the positions that we have. Of course, there is some pushback from various sectors and associations, etc. But the point is that we may have a challenge that we need to solve.
Yes, we do. It's good that you said that, because here in Curaçao, I looked at the census data, and the largest group, if I looked it up correctly, was citizens in the age group 50 to 65. That was by far the largest. So give them another 10 years, they'll be retired. We'll have a large group of people who are retired. And if you look at the bottom, it's not the shape you would want from a population this small, actually. So, yeah. something that definitely needs our attention. And I'm trying to do a little bit, that I can. In education, and trying to talk to a lot of students, and then when they make what I was saying, the choices of studies. And if we all do that a little bit, maybe we can get all our young ones back or keep them. And I don't want to say we should keep them necessarily, because I do feel it's really beneficial for young people to go abroad. They to be in a different environment, different culture. They really learn from that. But then I would really like for them to come back. Yeah. Or if they don't come back, at least other people to come back,
Yeah.
So, or to not come back, but come in instead of them.
Indeed. Garfield, before we wrap up, a question I wanted to ask you though, because I mean, the heading that I gave to this discussion is, Caribbean brain drain in the era of remote work, or in the remote work era. But do you find though that as much as remote work has probably increased more than it had been before the pandemic, you're finding more that organizations that seem to have said that they were embracing remote work and having these sorts of hybrid arrangements are probably stepping back from that and mandating that people come into the office. So, I mean, what has been your thoughts and observation about that?
Right. So there's some jobs that you just have to go into an office. You have to go to a location. There's some jobs based on skill level. Let's say even within the call centers or BPOs. You don't necessarily have to go to a location. You can work remotely, right? As long as the internet is up and running, it's stable. You can log in, you can take your calls, you can conduct business. So when it comes on to having that real estate, you don't necessarily need it. However, we have that cultural challenge. Many managers are micromanagers. They need to see you, they need to hover, they need to be above your shoulder. And that's part of the challenge. When you're managing a remote resource, your approach has to be different, right? Now you have to look at metrics and deadlines and so on, right? So like for me, I worked as a remote worker for in total about 16 years so far, right? And I've never had that level of remote management or micromanagement, right? I was given my deadlines. I was told, certain tasks. I complete them, move on, right? Over the more recent decade, I've had more flexibility. So let's say that I needed to run out to the supermarket to get something. I pop out, do what I do, get back in, continue working. Now, what many people don't recognize is that your productivity levels are higher, whether it's psychological and you feel that you're robbing time, so you're giving back, you end up working 12, 14, 16 hours a day, right? Many people don't notice that, right? But if there's a system in place that monitors and tracks, your usage of systems or how you interact, then someone will know. If your manager is looking at a dashboard and seeing those metrics, they will know, right? But it's a cultural thing. Especially here in the Jamaica and to the wider Caribbean. For companies now that rely on technology heavily, as opposed to people interaction, then you find a lot more remote work opportunities. The manufacturing space, it's sort of like a toss-up, because now they're saying, oh, we want you back in office so we can have a whiteboard session, we can have a brainstorming powwow. We've been doing brainstorming through these tools for the last 4 years. Why can't I use Zoom? Why can't I use WebEx? I can still have a brainstorming session with you. So it's just a mindset for some managers. It's like, I'll speak specifically for Jamaica. If I don't see you, I can't justify the amount of money that I'm paying you. So I need to see you in office, right?
Yeah.
That's the mindset of many managers. So those are the things that we need to get beyond, and then it will be better. But, to answer the second part of your question, in North America, I see the requests for having people coming back to the office more than I see it here in the Caribbean. Here, there's still some sort of stagnation. People are still, many many companies, because they had to reduce their real estate size, because, well, due to the pandemic, they had, let's say they had 5 locations. And they said, somebody decided, okay, you know what? Let me close down 3 or 4 of these locations. They saved a significant amount of money. They're still productive. Their staff is still doing what they need to do. So now they're questioning it and saying, okay, do I really need these people to come back in? They're productive. My revenues have pretty much been the same. They haven't dropped, but, like with every company, they're looking for year-over-year growth. So now they're saying, okay, what can we do to increase revenues or create additional revenue streams, right? And sometimes now they feel that I need to bring people back into the office so we can have those brainstorming sessions, because it's easier to do it than having it over a virtual media. So it's sort of a toss-up. It just depends on the company, what their vision is, what their growth objectives are. You'll get a different experience with them. What do you think, Esmeralda?
Yeah, so that's sort of what we do, right? We, like I said, we had the office in the Netherlands. In this case, people go twice a week, but the other days they work from home and they work remotely, Michelle. So it's exactly what you said. The rest of the team works here in Curaçao. They work remotely and it works perfectly. And then a few times a year, we buy a plane ticket for them to also come here, work here a few weeks. And then after a while, they say, you know what, I'm just going to move back. So that has been very successful. I think if more companies would do that, allow children of our islands, once they've, they live abroad, to work remotely for our companies. But yeah, what Garfield said, the companies have to be ready for that. It's a different type of management that you need to do if you don't see people. Yeah.
And just to your earlier point about the digital nomads. So, Canada has a program now for digital nomads. Bermuda has a program for it. Bahamas has a program for it, right? You go.
Yeah, we do too.
Yeah, you're in a sense you're getting paid from your home country, but you're spending in this new territory. So you're really building the economy of the new territory, and that's what most people want. And then even like Canada, if whilst you're there as a digital nomad, if you get a job, it's an easier transition. In terms of the local entity filing paperwork for you, to now regularize you and let you become a permanent resident. So
yes, I was talking to somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact, who is a digital nomad, works for a company in another country, but works from Curaçao. And then she said, I really want to stay here. I really like it. So I'm going to look for a job here on the island for a company. So yeah, that's definitely a good spin-off effect of having digital nomads be welcomed in your country.
I know we're up against time, Michelle, so I'll stop talking.
I'm just about to tell us, so, because we blew past the time already. But, Garfield and Esmeralda, thank you just so much. I mean, interesting conversation. I'm even actually going to ensure that I do a little bit more research about these solar flares and probably even start to mention it in terms of in the circles that I frequent or I'm invited to speak, because the whole issue of resilience is something that I think it's certainly near and dear to my heart, but more so when you look at what might be this imminent threat and just how well we might be prepared for it. Digital work, of course, remote work, of course, is something that I think we are seeing more and more, but also the impact on the brain, on our countries, the brain drain that has been happening is something that we cannot avoid. But it may also require us to probably just be a little bit more proactive in terms of how we broach it. And it's not necessarily about trying to stop it, but what might be options that we can explore to mitigate and compensate for the losses that we think are occurring. So just thank you so much for joining us. And just, have a great, rest of 2024. We might even have you back on the podcast later on in the year. But thank you just so much for joining us.
Okay. Bye, Garfield. Bye, Michelle.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. The music is from the composition The Last Word, We Ma Chérie by Andy Narrell. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a 5-star review, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on social media at ICT Pulse, either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.